The following is a local resident producers program. The program content is the sole responsibility of the producer and does not necessarily reflect the views or policies of CATV2, Oshkosh Community Media Services, the City of Oshkosh, or Time Warner Cable.
Hi everyone, welcome to Oshkosh. Cheryl Hentz here, and very pleased on this edition to be welcoming another candidate running for the Branch 5 judicial seat, being vacated for all intents and purposes by Judge William Carver, who has decided not to seek re-election for another term. So this evening we're very pleased to be talking with Mark Fremgen, who is one of the candidates running. There are 5 candidates who have so far announced their intent to run. E.J. Jelinski, who we did on an earlier show, Judge Carver's daughter, Caroline Carver, also David Keck, and one of the district attorneys, assistant district attorneys from Winnebago County DA's office, John Jorgensen. So we hope to be able to have all 5 candidates on sometime before the February primary. So anyway, Mark, thanks very much for being here. We appreciate your coming in.
Thank you for having me.
So what we generally do with political candidates, and this is this your first foray into the field of politics?
Running, yes.
Yes, all right. Well, welcome to the insanity, I guess. Anyway, what we usually do with political candidates is, start out by just saying, what are your qualifications? Why are you running? Not so much your qualifications, we'll kind of get into that, but, what's your background and why'd you decide to run for judge?
Sure. Well, I've been an attorney for 19 years, practiced in Oshkosh all 19 of those years. I started with the state as a state public defender, and I went into private practice about 9 years ago and was appointed the family court commissioner by the judges 10 months ago. About a year ago, I had decided that I was planning on running for this exact seat for a number of different reasons, and I filed in August of this year, and Judge Carver then subsequently retired, or announced he was going to retire, and as you pointed out, a number of different candidates have jumped into the fray. So,
and just because they've announced that they're running doesn't mean that they will actually file their papers, but I suspect that most, if not all, probably will. So
I would expect they would.
You told me something interesting, though, just before we started taping, is that unlike, I think, any other office, because this is a judicial position, you have to actually file your papers in Madison?
Correct.
Wow, okay.
Yeah.
So you'll be driving down there. Hopefully it'll be good weather when you take that trip down.
I hope so.
All right. So you made a decision to seek this particular branch before Judge Carver announced his decision to retire, basically.
Correct.
Okay. Was there a reason why you decided you would run against him? Because at that point you obviously didn't know he was going to retire. Any particular reason?
After being in private practice for about 9 years, after having served the state for 10, one of the things I noticed talking to other attorneys, being in private practice and handling more civil types of matters, divorces especially, some civil litigation, and the complaints mounted essentially that in that court you don't really get an opportunity to try your case. You don't get dates, matters get adjourned very often, and after being approached by several people noting my desire to run for public office, I decided I would run for that seat for that reason.
Well, see, those are some things that, of course, not being an attorney, I don't think most of us would hear those kinds of complaints. But certainly, as you must know, there have been a lot of complaints about some of his sentencing decisions. The most recent, of course, was the drunk driver who killed the 14-year-old girl and seriously hurt her mom. And the guy got, what was it, 3 years or 5 years? I don't remember which, but it did not seem anyway like enough. And we can all sit here and try and second judge Judge Carver, but we weren't in the courtroom. But that did seem like a pretty lenient sentence, just at first blush. So.
Well, and to be fair to Judge Carver, if that were the only reason a person were to run for that seat, I don't think that would be an appropriate reason. The problem with sentencing in criminal law, and especially and all 6 judges face it, is that there are so many different factors they have to consider, and one judge might consider one factor higher or more significant than the other, and I don't know what factors Judge Carver was considering. I personally agree. I thought it was a little light, but I wasn't in there and I didn't get to hear all the information, didn't get to read all of the letters from both sides that Judge Carver read. And again, I would give him at least some credit that it's a very tough decision, and based upon weighing factors, that might have been an appropriate sentence. Certainly, a lot of people thought it was much too lenient. Again, first blush, as you said, I agree. I thought it was a little light, but if that were the reason, I wouldn't be running. There were more problems, and since he's retiring, I guess it's really a moot point at this point.
Yeah, exactly. Now, this is a partisan position?
Nonpartisan.
Nonpartisan, okay.
Correct.
So you don't have to declare whether you're running as Republican or Democrat?
Can't.
Okay, all right. Okay, so what, you've got a lot of years of experience here, Mark. What do you feel are some of your stronger suits that qualify you to serve on the bench?
Well, I think the fact that I have, as I point out, 19 years of experience, years aren't enough. The variety of cases I've handled over those 19 years, I've handled cases involving civil litigation, nonprofit organizations, individuals and divorces, personal injury, criminal defense matters. I've prosecuted termination of parental rights cases, handled guardianships, mental health. Essentially, everything across the board I've been involved in, especially in litigation matters. I've handled over 6,000 individual clients and 50 jury trials, 100 plus court trials. I think that all of that has brought to me a certain level of experience and a certain level of patience, and I think that's the most significant quality that a judge can have, and that is being able to deal with some very difficult people, going through some very difficult times. And I see that as a family court commissioner as well, and at times it can be very difficult to be patient with individuals, but for the most part, I see myself as having, based upon all those years of representing so many different individuals and from different walks of life, being able to have that level that's appropriate and necessary to be a judge.
You know, you've spent a lot of years as a defense attorney. Now you're getting some family court commissioner stuff under your belt. You know, is there one that's a little bit more difficult than the other?
I would have to say that it depends upon the type of case.
Sure.
I think that as a family court commissioner, we have to deal with making decisions. And I suppose that's tougher than when you represent a person, you're just taking their side, and you're presenting and advocating that side. And it's easy to go in there and take a position because you know what it is. I'm hired to do this.
Right. As
a judge, you have to listen to both sides, and sometimes you're not going to make one person happy, or lots of times you don't make either one happy. And it can be difficult, especially with children involved.
Well, and because of the very nature of what those cases are, the emotions, I would think, probably tend to run a lot higher in most cases than some of the more, the criminal type cases that you're doing. Well,
and I think nationally those are the most dangerous cases too, and the reasons why in most courthouses around the country there's security that's designed to ensure the safety of people that are coming to court, as well as the employees and the judges themselves, in family actions. It's family actions that tend to be a little more violent than criminal actions, surprisingly.
Well, that's true, and you know, we've talked about in this county for a number of years off and on about bumping up the security. They tried some things and it wasn't really all that successful, and then of course the money factored into it and really sort of stopped it. Do you think that, thank God we haven't had anything really happen, do you think that we do need to maybe focus on some increased security at our courthouse?
Well, absolutely. I mean, there needs to be a change to the way that the courthouse itself is secure. But you've touched upon the right point, and that is there just isn't money for that. The increase in costs for labor and the increase in the costs of running government itself, not just the courthouse, and couple that with all the financial problems and you know, the tax base that's available, I think that the best process would be a brand new courthouse, but understand that that's pie in the sky. Unfortunately, that's just the case. So, but I think there are some band-aid approaches right now that could be helpful in making the courthouse more secure. And in fact, there is a courthouse security organization involving judges, members from the county board, members from the sheriff's department and the clerk of court's office, and the DA's office, and they've come together and come up with some ideas that will, I think once there is additional monies available in the next couple of years, at least make it a little more secure.
Is there any kind of, and maybe you don't know the answer for this, but is there any kind of grant money that might be available for something like that?
I know
or stimulus money or
they
something?
looked into some stimulus money, but it wasn't available.
Okay.
No.
All right. Well, we've got a wide variety of judges when it comes to sentencing. I think that Judge Gritton and Judge Hart Key, who is also up for re-election, by the way, you know, her term is coming up, but no one has yet announced, and if they haven't announced by now, I don't think they're going to, so she will probably be running unopposed for her seat. But I think that Judge Hart Key and Judge Gritton have a reputation for being a little bit more strict and tough when it comes to sentencing. Judge Carver, I think, has a reputation and an image for being less strict, pretty lenient, and then of course you've got the other judges who sort of fall in the middle. Where does Mark Fremgen see himself if he were to be elected? Which, is there one end of the spectrum or other that you would see yourself at?
I would expect, if you're looking for a particular degree of where I would fit within those parameters, I'm certain I'm somewhere in between. I don't believe I'd be at either end of the spectrum, but I consider that because the factors that a court has to consider for sentencing, the protection of the public and the character of the defendant, and what the victims want the court to consider, certainly all those factors would likely result in a fair sentence that takes in consideration safety concerns and the person's prior record. I'm sure that, in fact, I can guarantee you that there have been cases involving Judge Gritton and Judge Key where they haven't been the toughest sentence. And there have been cases with Judge Carver that they've been surprisingly tougher sentences. And that's because they've taken into consideration all of those different factors and decided that the most appropriate sentence was what was handed down.
Mm-hmm. I would think that when you're dealing with sentencing, and even you as a defense attorney, you know, trying to get the best deal for your client, it's tough when you're dealing with victims who are so emotionally wrapped up in the situation because they are the victim, and there are certain guidelines that judges and attorneys have to follow, and you can't really, I mean, you can't throw the book per se at someone if the law doesn't allow that. And I would think that that's a tough one to, I guess, get victims to really understand and appreciate.
Well, and I would never expect them to fully understand what's going on in the legal system because, as you pointed out, they're so emotionally tied to what is going to happen in court. And that's similar to what we discussed before about family court, that the people are just so emotionally tied to the situation, especially involving children, that even if you came up with an objectively fair approach to how to handle whatever the custody or placement issue is, that person, because of their emotional tie to this issue, isn't going to see it as being fair. They're going to see it as if they've been slighted. And I think that's probably the same in the criminal arena, where a victim comes forward and bears their soul, and the sentence is probably objectively a fair sentence. They may not see it that way because of the fact that they're so tied to what the matter that's before the court.
Sure. We're seeing more and more creative type sentences. You know, the drug court, the STOP program, which for those who don't know, it stands for Safe Streets Treatment Options, and that has to do with drunken driving laws and convictions and that type of thing. How do you feel about some of the more creative types of sentencings that we're seeing?
Well, and there's also volunteers in probation.
Yes.
There's teen court for juvenile cases. And there's some other uses of mediation or conflict resolution to deal with victims, and sometimes to get to bring the victims and the defendants together to allow the defendants to an opportunity to at least empathize with what they've put these people through. And certainly I think all those programs are good programs, assuming there's funding available for those, because that's the problem in the justice system is the resources. All the programs I think are very appropriate, dependent upon the circumstances and dependent upon the type of charge. I think the problem that you might run into, not just yet, but as the overcrowding continues, and if the changes in the recent law should reflect in some early releases from prison, if it doesn't occur quicker, you're going to see some of these programs being used for people that are not appropriate, just because there's no resource to put these people in jail or incarceration. That's when I think these programs potentially could fail. And I think that's the goal as a judge, is to ensure, regardless of the fact that there may not be money available, the prisons might be overcrowded. If the person deserves to go to prison, they should go to prison, not use one of these slots available for someone more deserving or that fits the mold for one of these alternative types of sentencing.
Well, everybody always says get tough on crime, get tough on crime, and yet, you know, trying to find that balance, you know, trying to find the money to be able to get tough on crime, whether it be more programs like this for those who are appropriately fitted for the program, or the prisons or what have you, you know, it all funnels back to money. And if you don't have it, then what are you going to do? And yet, as someone sitting on the outside looking in, or especially if you're a victim of a crime, you say, well, I don't care. Find it somewhere, do something, you know, protect society, protect us. And it's a balancing act that is not easy.
No, it's not. And that I think is the problem. And as you pointed out with the various different types of sentences you see by the different judges, some judges are trying to balance these programs with what the victims want and what society needs as far as protection. Some judges just impose a sentence and let the Department of Corrections, whoever, figure it out. And I think there's got to be a balance between the two.
We're taping this on the 17th of December, and just yesterday our state assembly passed this. It's the drunk driving reform package, and it addresses some minor differences, you know, between Assembly and Senate reform bills, but it's basically an effort to try and make some reform to our drunk driving laws. And, you know, we'd also earlier, I don't know if it was earlier this year or late last year, we saw some revisions to the drunk driving laws too. Obviously, we're moving in the right direction, I think, and I think a lot of society feels that way too. Do you think we still have a ways to go, Mark, in addressing this issue?
Well, I agree that it's going in the right direction, but I think it's a very weak bill. First of all, I've never understood why, coming from a criminal defense background, why a first offense OWI isn't criminal. Retail theft, disorderly conduct, battery, you can commit it once and you get charged criminally. Why is OWI somehow given that you get one one freebie and then the rest you get charged criminally. So I never understood that, and this bill really doesn't address that. It makes it criminal only if you have a child in the vehicle, and that doesn't make any sense why a person driving one time at 0.3 isn't as dangerous as a person driving the fifth time at 0.01. It just doesn't make sense to me. And also, I think the reason why I have some difficulties with this bill is, and you touched upon it, and I think we've almost talked about every question, is money. Is that conservatively, I've seen the cost estimate of being $17 million a year for this to be implemented.
For this bill?
For this bill.
Okay.
And actually, today I read that it's probably more likely in the $50 million range. So, because of all the unfunded mandated treatment programs that are part of this bill, and the idea that they're going to somehow receive an additional $250 per criminal conviction in fines and assessments is ridiculous. If you ask the clerk's office, to tell you they're barely getting probably half of the fines paid right now. So I think, as you said, it's going in the right direction. So politically, it was a good bill. From a realistic standpoint, I think it was pretty weak.
Maybe more feel-good legislation than effective legislation.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
What other types of platforms are you running on?
The main platform that I'm running on is essentially what the circuit court is. It's not the Court of Appeals. It's not a Supreme Court that's dealing with significant issues or constitutional issues, but it's the court of the people. And my platform has been and continues and will be that the circuit court needs to be open to allowing reasonable access for all litigants, attorneys, unrepresented, to have their opportunity to have their day in court. And I understand that there are times that there are attorneys and unrepresented individuals that may try to push the envelope, so to speak, but there needs to be that opportunity. You have to have people at least walk out of court saying, I had my chance, I brought my witnesses, I got my chance to speak. I may not have won, but at least I had my day in court, and that's my goal, is that everyone that walks out of my court will be able to at least say they got their chance. And I think that's been a difficult over the last few years, especially where I think this court has been more of a part-time court, and matters get pushed off, and the people are not getting their opportunity to have their case fully tried, get an opportunity to present their witnesses reasonably to the court, and allow the attorneys an opportunity to present reasonably their case so they can have a chance to at least convince the court that their position is the right position.
Sure. Can we talk a little bit more about that? And again, as you mentioned before, with Judge Carver retiring, that aspect or that complaint that a lot of attorneys have is going to go away. But it might help those of us on the outside looking in to understand maybe what you guys are dealing with as attorneys and how the court system really works, the judicial process. When you say that you're not really getting your day in court, it's not just you as an attorney, it's the person you're representing, and ultimately it could be the other side as well who's not getting their full case heard, if you will. Can you maybe elaborate a little bit more on what you mean by what's going on?
Well, and as you pointed out, that certainly with Judge Carver retiring, that really won't be as much of an issue. But and to be honest with you, the remainder of the branches in our county and some of the outlying counties do a very good job of giving you an opportunity to present your case. There are some counties that I've practiced in the past that limit the attorneys. For instance, in a jury trial, they may tell the attorney, you can only do an opening statement for 10 minutes. Or I'm going to allow you 20 minutes of cross-examination and that's it. In some counties, small claims court, they won't let you bring witnesses in. They want to hear what the witnesses are going to say first, and then they'll decide if they're going to let the witness speak. So it depends on what county and what level you're at within that county. But after having practiced in about a dozen counties, between commissioners, court commissioners, family court commissioners, in the federal level and in the state circuit courts, you hit the point that I'm trying to make with my campaign, and that is people expect to at least walk in and be able to say, I got to go into court, tell the judge exactly what happened, and he made a ruling. And many times we'll walk out of court with my client in the past in private practice, and they'll say, he didn't give us a chance. And that's what I want to avoid, is anyone coming to my court being able to say, when they walk out, at least I got my day in court.
Yeah. So what kind of a campaign are you planning to run? You know, campaigns have changed a lot in the last few years with things like Facebook and stuff like that. I mean, we've seen some campaigns run purely on Facebook. You know, and I think we're seeing less yard signs, at least it kind of seems that way to me, and yet there's still a lot. What kind of campaign is Mark Fremgen going to run?
Well, I think it's a typical campaign. There'll be yard signs, and we'll be going door to door with literature. It's certainly, you know, it's tough to do a grassroots campaign in January and February. It's hard to go out
get
there
those signs in the ground.
It's hard to do all that.
Much less anything else.
Motivate people to go door to door with you when it's 10 degrees. Yeah, but the typical meeting with people, going to organizations, the website I have up, and we've sent out letters, and we're going to send postcards, direct mailings as well. So we intend to present essentially your typical campaign. I'm not savvy enough. I'd have to have my daughter probably run a Facebook campaign, but
isn't that terrible when you got to rely on kids?
They know more about it than I do. That's for sure.
Okay, all right. I'm just told here that our next guest is not here, so if you want to keep going, we can keep going. I only prepared enough questions for half an hour, so we're going to kind of wing it here. But you know, why don't you tell me some of the more, without giving names, of course, because I know you can't, but some of the more difficult cases that you have either represented in a defense manner or in, you know, family court?
Well, you know, it's interesting. I would have to say that the most difficult case that I could ever say that I represented a person, and I would imagine most attorneys would say, aren't going to be those famous cases or the cases that you might recognize the name.
No O.J. Simpson type cases.
O.J. Simpson. It's always that case where, because of the circumstances or some of the dynamics of the case, the person, you know, the mental health problems potentially, family dynamics, those are the cases that can be the most difficult when you're dealing with a person that may not be entirely able to comprehend what's going on and certainly can't adequately assist in their own representation. Those are the most difficult cases, and that's where I think, from my experience, that I've been able to at least get to the level of where I'm at, where I understand and recognize when a person is at that level in family court. As the family court commissioner, I can recognize from the bench that this person might need some assistance or might need a little bit of help. And I can talk a little slower or talk down to them, not trying to be condescending, but recognizing I think I know where this person's coming from my past experiences, so I'll try to talk at a lower level or a lesser complicated level so that he doesn't feel as if he doesn't understand or she doesn't understand what's going on.
Less legalese.
Correct.
Okay, all right. Our next guest is here now, so
Okay.
I guess, you know, what I'll do is just ask you to take about 45 seconds or a minute, look into camera number 2 here, Mark, and tell folks why they should go to the polls in February and vote for Mark Fremgen for judge.
Well, first of all, I appreciate giving me an opportunity to be on the show tonight.
You're entirely welcome.
I would hope that I can count on all of your votes, all the persons watching the show tonight. I think that I have the requisite requirements and qualifications to be a judge, having practiced law for 19 years, and my experience extends beyond 6,000 clients and 50 jury trials. But I have what I believe the integrity and the moral backbone to be a judge as well. As I pointed out, that I think a judge needs to have a certain level of patience, and from my experience in dealing with a variety of different individuals over the many years, I think I've been able to attain that level of patience, and with my integrity as well as professionalism, feel that I am the most qualified candidate for judge. Thank you.
Very good. Well, thank you much. And whoever does make it through the primary will be having you or they back on before the general election. So.
Well, then I hope to see you in
All right, I do as
April.
well. Thank you very much. We
Thank you.
appreciate it. Just sit right there. We're going to take a short break. When we come back, we'll be joined by the interim superintendent from the Oshkosh Area School District, Bette Lang. We'll be right back.
Dear Mom and Dad, well, I finally have some time off, so I'm writing to tell you that I'm doing well. We have good days and bad days over here. We try to remember the good ones and get through the bad ones. Mostly we have each other, and that's what keeps us going. And Mom, since you asked, if anyone wants to help, just tell them to contact the USO. You can't believe how much they do for us. With love, your son, Michael.
Every year, the U.S. Department of the Treasury receives about 1.4 million reports of problems with paper checks. Checks can be lost, stolen, or delayed. If you still receive Social Security payments by paper check, Treasury wants you to know about a safer, more convenient way to get your money. The Direct Express Prepaid Debit MasterCard. The Direct Express card is new and is available to anyone receiving Social Security benefits, even if you don't have a bank account. Your monthly benefits will be automatically placed onto your card account each month on the day your money is due. While other debit cards cost money, it is possible to use the Direct Express card for free to make purchases, pay bills, and get cash at thousands of locations nationwide. There are no sign-up or monthly account fees. No more waiting for the mail or worrying about lost or stolen checks. Call 1-877-212-9991 or visit www.usdirectexpress.com.
We're in an emergency situation. We don't have extra. We have a little bit of water and a little bit of food. A meeting place, no.
No.
I don't think we have a first aid kit.
We have tuna fish, we have
Right.
beans, we have canned tomatoes,
True.
you know.
That's true, but that's really not survival food. Tomato paste.
Yeah, well, yeah.
And welcome back to the second half of Eye on Oshkosh. Bette Lang from the Oshkosh Area School District is here joining us now. She, of course, as you no doubt know, is the interim superintendent for the school district. And welcome. You're becoming a very regular guest and one that we love to have on because you're always, you're so full of information and so forthcoming with information as well. And
I
so,
love being here. Thank you for
well,
inviting
good.
me.
Well, you're becoming a regular guest, like I said, and before you leave the district, we'll have you back several more times, I'm sure. The main reason I wanted you on tonight, and if we have time at the end, we're going to talk about some other things, but the main reason that I wanted to have you on was you've got two meetings coming up in January. One had actually been scheduled for this month, and because of weather and so forth, it got pushed back. So now they're back to back, and one is one night and the other one is the next night. One is going to be January 5th at West High, and we'll get into the specifics of where exactly you go. And the other is the next night at January 6th over at North High School. And the whole point of these meetings is to talk about the 2010-2011 budget, which I think, it's great that you guys are starting to think about it so early. That's a departure from anything we've ever seen with, I think, any governmental body in this area. But you're also reaching out to the public and saying, we want your input, and that too is a departure. I mean, yeah, they can always come to the school board meetings and talk, but this is an even greater invitation.
I hope so, Cheryl, and it's really important to give enough time. And you're right, everyone's always invited to school board meetings, but there's a 5-minute limit typically, and it's very hard sometimes to get everything you want to say out in that much time. So what I'm hoping, I'm going to try to structure these meetings with a 5-minute limit, but with the idea that if someone is talking for a group, talk a little longer, because the most important thing for us is to get the input. At this point in the careers of most school districts in the state, there aren't a lot of easy reductions anymore, and I think this district has been thoughtful in reductions. They have some very good data on public management partners and Bray Architect reports on plans, and consolidating of students to have class sizes, at the minimum level is basically one of the best ways to save money. And when we have our students spread out in all these buildings, then it calls for consolidation, which then means closing buildings, and that is never popular. But if there are ways that people can think of to suggest that could make it a little easier on, easier to do, phase it in, whatever kind of ideas they have, we are just very open, and we basically have just moved forward the ideas that we had left from July 2009 when we made the last very large reduction. So that's our hope, that people will come with thoughts on what we've put out there, new ideas, something else we can cost out, because that's always the ticket. We don't want to upset a lot of people. Well, when you start consolidating buildings, you're upsetting a lot of people. So what's the trade-off? It should be able to save a lot of money, I would think, if you're going to upset people in their what the path that their children are going on. The best thing about Oshkosh is all the schools are great. Whatever school your child goes to, that child will have a wonderful education. So that part is nice, but I also know there's a lot of sentiment. And going to the north side of town or the west side of town, or go to the school where I went to school as a youngster, and I know that makes it very difficult.
There's that stigma too about north and west and east and
and whatever.
Fortunately, we don't have any school on the south side of town as far as high schools go, so we can eliminate that problem. Okay, so let's and one other thing that you kind of touched on is people getting upset, and we've already seen some people getting very upset over just the proposals, and they're just ideas,
That's what they are.
I mean, people shouldn't be overreacting to this. I mean, say, hey, I'm opposed to this, but don't go off the deep end thinking that just because it was in the paper as a concept or an idea, that it's, just because it's in black and white doesn't mean it's engraved in stone.
Amen. That's very good, very well put, because it still takes a board decision. It will bring forward recommendations, and then with options, obviously, and the board will have to make a decision. But again, providing these opportunities for the community, I think, should be helpful to the board in their decision. Whether board members can attend or not, we will be collecting summary statements of what people say. So all of that information can be factored into this process. Change is difficult. We know change is difficult. There's a little saying that says, change is great, you go first. Well, I think that's, I totally understand that. So I know that this won't be easy. And Cheryl, on the other end, we're going to be laying off staff, and you know how difficult that is. When you tell people that they won't have a job the next year. So none of these things are pleasant or fun. But they are things that need to be considered, because the option otherwise is raising local taxes. When the state aid dropped back from 66% to 62%, the pressure was on the local school district here to say, how much do you want to raise local taxes? And I think the board did a great job. It could have gone up 9+%, and actually went up 7%, of which about 4% of that was the referendum, the 1.3 million, because the board didn't take its option to tax above the revenue cap. They didn't even tax to the revenue cap. So very thoughtful and conservative, and trying to move forward, and I think that's where we'll be this time as well. Some combination of reductions and taxes that people can understand and live with.
Sure. Well, let's, I guess the best place to start here is at the beginning, as they always say. So what did we have to reduce the budget by in the budget that was just done, and which is reflected on the tax bills that we all got about a week or so ago? And then contrast that, Betty, with the amount that you're going to have to shave off of the budget in the next school year.
It was $5.3 million were reduced for 2009 budget, and that was certified in October. So the 9-10 budget, we reduced $5.3 million. Because we're in the second year of the biennium, we're projecting between $3 and $5 million again. That this time around, we're also projecting, instead of about a 9, it would about a 9%, between a 7 and 9% raise in local taxes. If the board would tax to the revenue cap, we have no indication they want to. They do not want to tax heavily. That's why that $3 to $5 million target is so important, because in order to keep taxes down, we need to reduce expenditures, and that's what this whole combination of options and plans, that's what it's about, reducing expenditures. So that's where we are.
Well, see, you know, I guess I'm going to play devil's advocate here because I really have some mixed feelings about this. You know, I don't have a bottomless bank account either. You know, we all have a ceiling that we can not go past. But on the other hand, when voters go to the polls and say, we are giving you permission to exceed the revenue caps by this much, then, you know, it just seems to me like we're having to make a lot of tough choices here when some of them maybe wouldn't have been needed to be made. Or wouldn't have been needed. I don't know. You know what I'm trying to say
Yes,
here.
I do.
That's a weird sentence to try to put together. We wouldn't have had to have made some of those decisions if they had taxed like the voters said they were willing to be taxed. I guess that's what I'm trying to say.
And that's a very good point, and I think the board's perception of this was, in April of 2009, the rules were one way. At that point in time, we were expecting $275 per student to raise the revenue cap. We were expecting 66% state aid, or in that neighborhood. By June, the rules had changed. We only were getting $200 per student, so we needed to reduce the budget, because we had planned for $275, we needed to reduce the budget there. And on top of that, the state aid was dropping off, which was unprecedented. Never in the state has the state aid been backed off like that. So the board was in very new waters and had to make some real difficult decisions in a very small window. If you remember, July.
Yeah.
That's when they actually had to cut they cut $2 million in May and another 2.3 in July. And it was difficult. And I think that's what was so disconcerting to everyone. And that's what caused the board to back off, I think, and say, thank you very much, community. We're still going to spend the $1.3 million. That's still happening. The board, and we cut other places so that money was available, because it is important to keep the buildings in good shape. Just like it's important to keep good teachers and staff in buildings, you've got to keep them in good shape. So that was the part that was troublesome. And because we know the rules now, that's another reason we can get out here early and say, look, this may seem like the worst case scenario, but we think we're projecting what it is going to look like. So here's the reality. Let's try to get used to it. Let's bring some ideas forward and work through them. And Cheryl, I know I'm with you. I wish we could take the emotion out of it. It's very difficult to take the emotion out of it.
Well, we're creatures of habit.
Yes.
And like you said before, nobody likes change. At least most people, I don't think, like change. And you know, but at the end of the day, once we resign ourselves to the fact that change is inevitable, and I think that whenever there is major change like this, I think whether it's the city council or the school board or the county board, whoever it may be, I think they try and make it as palatable as possible, you know, and once you really kind of get into the groove of things, it's not as bad as what you thought, but still, it's getting to that point. And so let's talk about some of the things that you guys are putting forth as suggestions. And again, this is not engraved in stone. They're starting places. They're places to start the conversation, if you will.
That's exactly what they are.
So let's go over them. What are the things that you guys are putting out there as a district that you feel maybe need to be done?
Well, at least need to be thought about. Let's put it that way, Cheryl, an option. One is to reduce a West Side Middle School building. If you recall in the referendum, I talked about most districts our size have 3 middle schools, and we have 5. We have a unique circumstance here, though, because 2 of them are K-8s. So that does make a difference. But and this came forward from a report, making Tipler into an elementary school would allow us to move the Shapiro students into Tipler along with Lakeside students. The Shapiro building in the 10-year facility plan was the goal, I guess, or the building plan was to build alongside Shapiro, build a new building, and then remodel the old one. So the children, we build the building, put the children in, and remodel. The big interest in Shapiro is there really aren't walls. It's one of the models of schools without walls. Walls would be nice. Most places that didn't have walls have put them in now. So and so this would be a way to say, okay, we're going to give you a walled school and then use Shapiro for something else. So that came forward. Now, is Tipler an ideal elementary school? No. has science labs. We don't need science labs in elementary. A technology room for a technology lab. We don't necessarily need that for building things with saws and things like that. So there's some rooms that wouldn't be immediately usable, but there are classrooms that would be. Some are small, some are large. Again, these are not ideal options. So that's one thought, and then it would be closing Lakeside School, and Shapiro could be reconfigured into maybe a place for Oshkosh East if that's what the board decides to do, or whatever other option the district comes up with. It's been suggested that we would reduce one North Side Middle School building, and then the North Side, Merrill Elementary and Middle would become Merrill Middle. Webster Elementary and Middle would become Webster Elementary. And people will say, well, why would that help? Well, again, it helps with consolidation of teachers, and you can use the classrooms to the optimum level, and that's, again, cutting staff is really, that's one of the ways that you save money, because salary and benefits are 80% of the budget. So that's what you have to get to. So that's another suggestion. And either one of those could be done, or they could be done together. Then a third thought that can't be done with the first two is to take the 5th graders out of some of the elementary schools and put them into the middle school. That would make K-4 elementary schools. Again, we could consolidate, and there would be the ability to close a school with that thought. The feeder schools would basically stay the same, so that would be useful. I think it wouldn't be quite as upsetting. Doesn't save as much money either as the middle school options. Another thing in middle school teachers right now, we have our literacy and math teachers teaching 66 minutes, and then the rest of our teachers are teaching 43. If we had all teachers in the middle school teaching 45 minutes or 48 minutes, that does save staff as well. When you have those schedules that are kind of not parallel, that costs a little more money. So that would be an option for the middle schools. The trouble with that is middle schools right now have a common planning time where teachers can get together and work on subjects together.
Is that the collaboration time? Okay.
It's actually, and they can do it daily or every other day. It's just a small group, like the social studies, science, math, and literacy work together.
Okay.
They wouldn't have that, and that's a loss. You know, that part's a loss. Would we be more efficient? Would our middle schools be bigger? Yes. Would we be able to offer more electives? Yes, because right now if we have very small classes, we cut them.
Yeah.
So there's a silver lining. Student-teacher ratios at the high school. Our high school's populations are dropping. It's just where the bubbles are moving through.
Yeah.
There are 2 large classes of 900 and 800 something left, and we're getting to the 700 classes. So we can cut teachers there, which again is very difficult because we're losing students, and we can also raise class sizes, and that actually comes up with, depending if it goes to a 1 to 25 ratio, almost $2 million in savings there. Athletic director positions, those positions seem to come forward so much. I think if you have athletics, you need athletic directors. That's because it is quite a management job, and trying to reconfigure those positions so that we still can offer things for children, make sure everything is safe and secure, but then maybe not have as many people doing it. Eliminating 7th and 8th grade athletics has been looked at. The savings there are, for 8th grade or for 7th grade, it's only $83,000, and I say only because when you're looking at $5 million, but again, everything needs to be looked at. Raising some fees for athletics user costs. Oshkosh East High School, the lease for that school, we lease it yearly, and we have turned in our letter to say we no longer want to lease it. That's why I mentioned earlier another home for East. Other thoughts have come forward. Do we do a school within a school? Put the students back into one of the high schools in a separate way, which some people favor and some don't. Some think it should be by itself. Do we do more virtual instead of bringing the children together? So we're looking at Oshkosh East. Alternative education, or places for alternative ed, are important. Does it have to look like it's always looked? That's one of the things we have in front of us. And the lease for Oshkosh East is about $120,000, so that's going to be a nice savings. Discontinue extra contracts. We do have contracts that some people work in the summer, we pay extra. And we need that work done, so we have to look at our policies and practices, because we must be set up that we're creating that work, so we have to rethink how we do business. Summer school is still on. That's still going to happen. I'm happy about that. We really need to continue learning through the summer. So, and besides that, I've had people, just some suggestions that have been called in, Cheryl. One gentleman called and said, how about if we build if we're going to go to a referendum again, because Oak Lawn is still out there and there's discussion about Oak Lawn, how about if we build a mega high school, like 3,000 students, move the middle school students into the 2 present high schools and move the elementary students into the middle schools, and then have a more productive or efficient group of students. And I thought that's very interesting. That we did talk about price tags, and about 10 years ago a mega high school for 3,000 students was about 55 million. Oh yeah, it's they are very, very expensive. But I thought that thought process was good. It's good to say, okay, what's another way to look at this? Because we do need buildings to house children.
Right.
I mean, there's just no ways around it, but can they be housed differently? So that's the kind of thing I'm hoping will happen at the meetings. I'm hoping people will kind of throw out ideas that may seem off the wall, but down the line may actually prove to be worth something, you know.
Well, and not even necessarily down the line. I mean, throw out as much stuff as you can, no matter how off the wall you think it may be. And from there, you can either use something perhaps down the line, or maybe you can take something and say, well, this wouldn't obviously work like this, but maybe we can tweak it just a little bit. You know, a mega high school sounds like a good idea in theory. Where would we build it, though?
Well, that would be
there's not a space for something like that, is there?
That is very true. Remember the trouble we had? Riff Road was not an ideal site, obviously, and when the board looked up and down Jackson and tried to find, there really isn't. And you need, I mean, a high school is probably 100 acres if you're going to put all the everything, you know, all the fields and everything with it. And you do want to create enough space for a high school. So that would be a tough thing to decide. Maybe we would have a Southside High School then.
We might. Well, maybe I spoke too well, but at least I spoke accurately. We don't have one right now.
No, we don't. No.
As of this taping, we don't. You know, just a thought as far as East High School goes. Are there any classes that are presently taught in the administration building at all?
No, not anymore.
Okay.
One of the thoughts with closing and repurposing schools was maybe the administration building would be a building we could vacate and have administration be in Shapiro or some other place. What we find with the administration building, it's on a lease or a lease to own from the armed forces, and so it could only be used for education, but that means it could house students. It's not necessarily set up well to house students, but it is an option, and I think that's where, I think East actually started at central office and then grew and then found a new home. So,
because I think, if memory serves me correctly, it seems to me that at least at one time, I believe, the Neenah Joint School District, you know, was doing some of their teaching in, I think it was even in the boardroom at the administrative offices. So. It's just a thought. I can't take credit for that. It's not my original thought. It's just something I saw someone else doing. So are those the only other options then that we're dealing with here?
Well, and we've talked about others, just kind of smaller, I guess you'd say. So there are other combinations of things that we're looking at and ways to deliver services. They don't rise to the level of the ones I've mentioned, Cheryl. So those are why I put those out there, because I think those will probably get the most juices running for thinking, and you know, be something to weigh in on. And because I like I said, I think people need to know the gravity of the situation, in the sense that it's another $5 million, and that is going to impact a lot of different things. You know, we've talked about things of, do you kind of create magnet schools where one school has all of the tech ed type things and the other school has all the AP classes, and all those kind of things are struggles, because there's a sense of needing to be equitable on each side of town. So those thoughts are out there, but I think those are down the line as well, as trying to, because again, it all comes down to how do we get about 25 students in a classroom so that we can be efficient, and, you know, as efficient as possible at the higher levels.
Okay, so I'm assuming that you can accommodate up to how many people at these two meetings?
Well, I believe one is in Alberta Kimball, so that's a very large auditorium, so I think anyone who comes would fit in there. And the other one I believe we're having in either the North High Auditorium, I think it's a North High Auditorium, and that's not quite as big.
Okay.
And Cheryl, the meeting it'll be the same meeting both nights, meaning it'll be a collection of input and discussion, and I'll do a little PowerPoint just to kind of set the context for people who haven't been, keeping up on or up to speed, and then we'll start gathering input. So if you can come you don't really need to come to both nights unless you want to, but I'm hoping then people kind of pick one or the other and be able to make it.
So January 5th, what day of the week is that?
It's a Tuesday.
Tuesday, okay. So the first one is Tuesday, January 5th, 2010. That almost sounds weird just to say, much less look at on paper. It says F room, but that is the
oh, I'm sorry, that is different than the auditorium. That's
Yeah.
different. Yep, and it's a very large room though. We'll have chairs set up.
Right.
in there.
This is doors 29 and 30 is where you go in, and that is at Oshkosh West High School. And then the following night, Wednesday, January 6th, it'll be in the theater at Oshkosh North. And for anyone who doesn't know, I think everybody knows, but that's at 110 West Smith Avenue. And the meetings start at 6:30 p.m. How long do you anticipate them lasting? However long people want to talk?
Yes, as long as people have something to say. And at North High School, they should enter door 7.
Door 7,
Yes, it's
okay.
door 7.
I did not have that information. I will put that on my website as well.
Thank you very much.
So, okay, I want to touch on one other thing real quickly because we're running out of time. And you had actually mentioned it before that 80% of the district's budget is salaries and benefits. And, and that's true in almost any business. The biggest majority usually of your budget is salaries and benefits, and there's not a whole lot of ways to get around that. The difference here is that these are public employees where they're union employees. Things have been bargained and agreed to over the years, and there's quid pro quo and there's QEE and all that stuff. But, and I understand that you can't necessarily take away something that you've already given and promised, and yet we can only make so many closures, we can only make so many cuts. Sooner or later, there's nothing less, nothing more that you can cut, nothing more that you can take away and close. In your time here, Bette, what has been the feeling of the teachers union, either locally or statewide, as far as are they willing to make any kinds of concessions? I mean, just like your district's budget, our district's budget is strapped, all of our household budgets are feeling the pinch as well. And just like there's only so much you can cut here, there's only so much that we can give as taxpayers. Are the teachers willing to give anything?
And I'm probably not the person to answer that, Cheryl, but I have to say there's discussion. And I think our teachers are very well aware of the tight times we're in. And you're right about a benefit. You really can't take a benefit back that you've given. But is there a way you can do it for less money? Can you still give a level of service to your staff who deserve it very much at less money? And the board is looking at an insurance broker who does just that, challenges the insurance company on the costs of things to try to bring those costs down. Because you're right, we have to address that salary and benefit package, and you're not going to, we've had people take freezes. Our administrators took freezes, a couple other of our unions took freezes, but that's a one-time, and it doesn't mean ongoing.
That's right.
And so that's why the benefits have to be looked at. And thank you for asking me about that, because I do think we have staff out there, people out there who say, yes, we do have to look at something. They're living in homes with spouses maybe who are working in the industry who are having their benefits looked at. But again, if we can do it for less money, that would be a key, and that's what we're striving to do.
Okay, excellent. Well, thanks very much for being here. We
My
didn't have
pleasure.
time to get to anything else, but that's good. So thank you for joining us. Have a happy new year, and we will see you next time. Until then, take good care. Keep your eye on us. We've got our eye on Oshkosh.